Hello there everybody, you're the audience, my name is Supersonic Blur, and welcome to a slightly different video for Hand of the Gods. Today, I thought I'd go over the cards that are currently in the game, and what I'm going to do here is, instead of just sort of talking about the cards and how good or bad they are, I thought, you know what, let's actually just sit down and go through the cards and actually give them a rating system and look at them and think a little bit more and then compile that information and work on doing that. Not just necessarily deck guides, but for you guys who want to be able to work on decks on your own and sort of put some things, I thought, hey, why not just make a deck guide for it? Or, sorry, a rating guide for the cards. So, basically, this is just going through the decks, or going through the cards and thinking, like, what cards usually run in decks, what sort of cards have potential in certain situations, and then giving them a rating out of 1 to 5, which I'm going to use stars because I'm original like that. So, there are sort of 6 ratings, including 0 stars, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 stars, and just a quick breakdown on all of them. 0 stars is just, why is this even a card? Doesn't make sense as a card, it's completely understated, it's too situational to even be considered as a thing that should be in the game. 1 star is the idea that the card does a thing, but there are cards that just do it better. So an example of this could be, for example, Backstab is a 1-star card. Yeah, it does 3 damage to the enemy leader. However, that's not really that great. And yeah, sometimes 3 damage is just what you need, but there are other things that can do that for you. 2 stars is, this is a sort of an experimental or maybe a tech choice that you put in. Often at times you may end up cutting this card for space, or if you're running it, it's in a very specific style and type of deck. 3 stars is run in very specific decks. It's not too strong on its own. It does have potential to be a dead draw as much as it does alive. So an example of this can be things like Anzus. Again, just as examples here. And again, as we'll preface as well, these are my personal opinions on this, running the cards and also talking with other people and sort of getting a general idea of where people seem to view this, because again, people's opinions are different on things. It's kind of a thing of human nature where you can have different opinions on it. So again, it's entirely up to you as to how much of this you agree with this. I'm just going to go down the list and give my reasoning for it. If you think it's wrong, by all means, go ahead and let me know in the comment section down below. That's what it's there for. 4 stars. This is a very strong card that will be run in most variations of a deck. So a good example of this would be something necessarily like Fate. For example, Fate is just going to be a decent card that does a fair bit of removal for it. So again, that's just an example. And 5 stars, this is just a card that is so strong you shouldn't ever not want to run this in the deck. It offers a lot in every situation, and there's very rarely a time at which you can't ever see it being a bad thing to have in a deck. So, now that we've got a basic idea of what the cards are, or the card rating is going to be, start going over the Norse spells. First is going to be the 0 mana Daggaz. Deal 1 damage to an enemy, spawn a cursed warrior. 1 star. My reason for this, yes, there are times when just spawning that 1/1 is useful. Yes, the free damage is nice. Yes, this can hit the stone, but it's not very impactful. Late game, this doesn't do anything. You need to draw this early, and it has to be in conjunction with something. It's a very weak form of removal. It's not like something, for example, a Blood Bond in my end, where they get to just turn something into 1/1s and kill something. This has to deal 1 damage and then it. And you don't get a choice as to where that 1/1 is going to spawn, nor does it have charge or anything like that. So it's just a little bit too situational and just takes up a card slot. Backstab. 1 star. Dealing 3 damage to the enemy leader sounds great when you first get the idea that Norse is aggro. You just hit the stone as hard as you can. However, this helps in no way secure the board. This does not help with a tempo swim or put consistent damage. It's just 3 damage for 1 mana into the stone. You don't get a choice where this goes. It just goes stone. And that's not always going to be the thing that you need in a situation. Mayhem. 3 stars. While this can combo well with things like a Crippling Curse, and it is good in the early game and when you can swarm on a board. This late game can be very poor, especially if you end up losing board control and you end up with a very small board. As a result, absolute worst, you have nothing on the board. This is a 3 mana, summon a 1/1, deal 1 damage to a random thing. This card gets better the more cards you have, or you have more minions on the board, and it gets worse the fewer you have on the board. So 3 is probably going to be the place where it's going to sit well. Like I said, around sort of the first 5 turns when you can get a board and kind of hold it with 1/1s is good. After that, it's kind of not so good and is just an issue. Pardon. While having your board stick around is nice, Norse really doesn't have any minions that are worth putting this on, and this isn't worth running instead of a removal spell. All of your minions have too low a attack value and health value for this to be efficient to work with outside of very early on in the game, and at that point, why are you not just running removal instead of it? Valhalla's Blessing, 2 stars. Drawing is nice, and the discount is nice. However, it's just a Norse card, and sometimes the Norse cards aren't going to do great. Also as well, while the draw is nice, you are having to factor in that 1 mana on a turn where you could instead run something else, like for example, a Warrior Sigil or Valhalla Sorcery to get something else from your deck. You can argue that this can be better off depending on what cards come in for Norse, so this card kind of depends on the other stuff in your deck and in the game right now, but 2 stars feels about right given the rest of the cards that this is likely to be able to pull. Valhalla's Sorcery. Versatility is great. However, using that spell the same turn puts a 1 mana cost onto it, and a lot of the other spells already require them to be cheap enough to offset what they actually do. As a result, this just isn't great. That being said though, if you are going to run some of this, try and hold it for a situation where you know, alright, I need a specific card. Again, this can get better depending on what other spells and things come into the game for the Norse Pantheon, but right now, it just kind of feels a bit iffy. But again, generating a resource isn't bad, and the fact that you can use it you can get some versatility from it is nice, but it's not too great in other situations. Warrior's Sigil, 2 stars. This works well with any of the buff cards and can generate you a little bit of board presence. It's very good early, but it does tend to just sort of drop off very hard around when you have sort of 4 mana, like turn 4, because they're not strong enough to present a threat unless you have already swarmed the board and are winning fairly hard. This is either a win more card or kind of, sort of, maybe do something, but again, it's just summoning the 1/1s. They don't have instant damage, their impact isn't that great unless you have some way of instantly buffing those, at which point then you're using another card for it. Anzus, 3 stars. The omens here aren't too bad. Giving a +1/+1 has its niche times where it's useful. Silencing stuff can be very useful in control matchups, and dealing 2 damage can be very useful when you just need to remove something. That being said, again, it's sometimes finding those points can just be a bit awkward, and there are other removals that you have available to you which you can use just as efficiently, when most likely you're going to be using this for silence, or you're going to be using this for that 2 damage. So as a result, there are other things which can do that may potentially work better in a Norse deck. Charge, 1 star. This doesn't really accomplish anything. You are playing +2 mana onto whatever you summon to do that damage instantly. Unless this is stopping you from losing the game outright, from taking lethal damage, or potentially pushing in that damage that 1 turn faster, really not that strong a card. It just takes up a deck space and it's not needed in the slightest. Crippling Curse, 5 stars. This is the perfect answer to any threat on the board, and at 4 mana, this allows you to remove anything that is in any of the 5 of the 8 Summoning Stone positions from standstill. This is too good not to run. Straight up. Too good not to run. You run 2 of this, because this couples with Mayhem. This can couple with any of the 1/1s you have on board, any 1 random damage that you have being able to throw out. This can couple with Soul, which we'll talk about later. And this can also couple with the next card we're going to be talking about, which is Fate. Fate I have rated at a 4-star card. Again, personal opinion. Early game, this has strong potential to just help you curve out on the board. As well as that, the fact that it can hit 2 things, it is 2 mana for 4 damage. Even if 2 of that hits the stone, in a fair few situations, that's not too bad. I personally like Fate as a card. I know that a lot of people don't necessarily run this and see this as a good card. Personally, if you can have it in earlier parts of the board, this can work well. This can work well against decks which want to just sort of spam things on the board. This can help you control and remove multiple threats at the same time. Again, this can be used to just hit something onto the stone if you need it to. Again, Norse lost a lot of that damage to the stone through their spells and things, so Fate can still do that, which isn't too bad. So from that regard, I like running Fate. Gungir's Might, 1 star. Dealing 2 damage for 2 mana sounds good. But when I just mentioned that Fate, you can sort of control this RNG a little bit better. Unless it gets super late, in which case then Gungir's Might does have a slight advantage. But in the super late game, even if this is the only card in your hand, you don't want to draw Gungir's Might. Gungir's Might doesn't do enough on its own. It just drops 3 damage. So if you don't have a board, and you draw Gungir's Might, and it's the only card in your hand, yeah, that's not going to give you that great comeback potential that you need it to. Hunter's Sigil, 2 stars. This is a very slow card, and while the ranged does sometimes give it benefit over Warrior's Sigil, Warrior's Sigil is slightly more easy to slip into a turn just because it is less mana. It does make sense that it would have to cost more, seeing as ranged have a slight benefit over melee minions. That being said though, it's just 2 mana, and that's a little bit harder to try and fit into a turn. You can play it turn 1, yes, okay, but that's not really doing much. You can play it turn 2, where you have 3 mana, but then you're left with 1 mana left over. So it can be a little bit awkward and clunky to try and fit into a turn nicely. Banish. Banish all enemy units in a 2x2 area. For 3 mana, this is a 1-star card. This is not removal, and it's not that useful. This doesn't let you hit the stone straight away because the cards are still in... it still takes up that slot. Also, as well, you're relying on a 2x2 area, so that doesn't actually help you. And it only gives you that 1 turn, it gives you that 1 turn for your opponent to not be able to do anything with those cards. So, far too situational. This is not removal, and it doesn't actually help you. The only thing it can sometimes do, and this is the very rarest occasion, is it can keep you alive whilst you punch in a little bit more damage. Enrage. Give a friendly +3/+3 and it will die at the end of your turn. Really not that useful. Norse needs its minions to stick around, and while +3/+3 for 3 mana is a lot, not particularly great when that unit then dies. And for 5 mana, this is assuming that there is nothing on the board, for 5 mana, summoning a 4/4 with charge that dies at the end of your turn isn't that great. Even if it's punching into something with 4 health, it would be nice if that thing could stick around potentially. Gift of Muning, 3 stars. It's a simple removal, and the option for it to be able to draw a card is pretty nice. This works a little bit better than Gungir's Might, because where Gungir's Might's like, oh, if this is the only card in your hand, it deals 3 damage. This just says, hey, look, 1 more mana, deal 3 for 3, it's perfectly fine, and because you're more likely to be able to push out a lot more, this also works as a little bit of draw for you. So because of that, really nice card. Run it at 3 stars. Maybe even you could push it up to 3.5, maybe even 4 stars if you're really feeling it. But again, sometimes it's just a little bit awkward. It did lose the ability to hit the summoning stone, which fair enough makes a lot of sense. But even as removal, it's not too bad. The only time it can be a dead draw is if you just don't have anything to be able to hit it on. But if you don't have anything to hit it on, chances are that means that you've got something on the board, and that's not too bad. Hasten Fatalis, 1 star. The buff isn't permanent, and 3 mana to deal however much damage, again, requires too much from your previous cards and minions to be effective. Even if this is on something big, Like, let's say this goes on to a Thor, and he has 4 damage. Congratulations, you spent 3 mana to deal 4 damage. That sounds great, but if you need to use this for removal, unless it's on a ranged unit, and it fights into a melee unit, that doesn't actually help you. It's not working in the same way as Apollo, which has the ability to be buffed up and then hits twice automatically. And again, this doesn't last permanently. If this is a permanent effect, then yeah, this would be maybe a 3-4 star card, because it has the potential to increase your damage fantastically, and also as well lets you punch in a little bit of damage and still trade into stuff, and with more of your ranged units, you can use that efficiently. But it doesn't, so it's a 1-star card. Runestone of Ire, I rate this as a 5-star card. Some people think that I may be overrating this, and fair enough, I can understand why. However, this card essentially says, if you have removal, you use it on this card. Doesn't matter what removal it is, you use it on this card. And if you don't have removal for it, then this can gain value, insane value in the next turn. Even if in the later stages of the game, in a more mid-rangey, control-y style deck, Runestone of Ire creates so much tempo for that deck at the point where it pops off. At 8 mana, you can drop this down and a Hell down, and anything you have on the board instantly gains that +2/+2. That is fantastic, and I really do love this card. I think this is going to be a stay in near enough every Norse deck for a very long time. Until more silences come out, at which point then maybe it doesn't. But until then, 5-star card. Siege. I rate Siege as a 3-star card. This can be strong as a finisher, but it is only good against the stones, and it can only be used on minions on the board, which can then hit the stone for this to become useful. There is a slight thing with Soul that can use this, where if you use Siege on a Soul and she hits the summoning stone, because of the way that she works, because she deals her damage in an AoE, because she hit the stone for 3, that AoE will also hit for 3. So that can be useful. But again, this is kind of the win a lot more card. Very, very good in aggro decks, and high aggro decks that can get this turn 4 or so can do phenomenal things with this, and it can close out a game very quickly. However, the later you go into the game, the worse this gets. Could possibly see this moving down to 2 stars, but again, with Norse aggro being quite popular, this is very strong for that situation. Wind Demon, 2-star card. Yes, giving a +2/+2 is nice. However, depending on what the board is, depends on how good that is in the first place, and then just dealing 3 damage to your summoning stone feels like a kind of a thing which shouldn't be there. Personally, I feel like Enrage should be a +3/+3 and deal 3 damage to your summoning stone. Wind Demon should just be that +2/+2. End of story. It's simple, gives +2/+2, maybe a little understated, but maybe at Enrage levels it makes a little bit more sense. You get angry and you deal stuff to the card. That, personally, is what I see with the card, but +2/+2 isn't bad, but again, this is all relying on cards that you have on the board from previous turns. Or it makes a +3, it makes a 3/3 for 5 mana and deal 3 damage to yourself. Not too great. Coerce, 2 stars. This is a fairly high cost card, and this will only get value if you have enough minions on board. If we said that 3 mana +3/+3 is, 3 mana +2/+2 is okay, then that would mean that you'd want to get at least another 1 onto that for Coerce to be somewhat okay, and that would be 3 minions on the board. And even then, it just doesn't feel like it does enough for Burst. If you wanted to run Burst to hit the stone or something, then why not just run Siege? Because Siege does +2, and it doesn't matter about the additional health because you don't care about that. Or alternatively, if you wanted to get +2 attack on something and not hit the stone, then you could use something like Frenzy. 2 stars. This is nice for making trades, but it's not having as a permanent effect, does limit the value of this card. Also as well, again, how big of a board do you have, and how badly do you need to use it? And again, if you're going to use this for if you're going to use this for hitting the stone, run Siege. If you're going to use this to trade, okay, but again, unless you don't have your Crippling Curses available to you, then you're just having to use something that's way more expensive than potentially need be. And finally, for the Norse spells, we have Web of Weird. Discovering a Norse god is nice, its versatility. Gaining +2 is okay. The big issue with this is while it sounds versatile, there are only 9 gods that this can pick from. So 9 gods, you're going to get 3 of them. You have a 33% chance to pick a god that you need in that situation. Plus also as well, if you want to play that this turn, you are adding 4 mana to the cost of it for +2 attack. Not +2/+2, just +2 attack. It's not super strong, and even on the tankier side of it, which is just Ymir, that is 9 mana for a 5/7. That's a lot. That is a lot. This card just pushes the price of whatever card you get for too much. Way too much. So as a result, it's just very difficult sometimes to effectively play that card. Yes, generating resources is nice, but the cost of it is too high for it to be effective the same turn you use it. So moving on then to the Norse minions, we are going to start off with Ratatoskr. 4 stars, 2/3 for 2 mana is great. Absolutely great. The fact as well that this thing can punch in for 3 damage on particular targets is fantastic. Yes, there is a 50% chance for this thing to hit that on 1 minion when there's only 1 minion on board, because it still counts as the stone. The RNG is what holds it back from being a 5-star, but if it didn't have the RNG, it'd be like a 6-star card. As a result, I just really like this card. It's a solid early play. It's just really good. It's what Norse needs if you're going to run that more mid-rangey control style thing. It works well with buffs, it holds a board early, and it can do a lot of good for you, especially against those more token decks who want to throw out things. This can start pinging out those ones without having to trade into them itself, which makes it a very nice card. Skadi, 3 stars. For the total cost of 4 mana, a 5/6 over 2 bodies is pretty good. It's pretty good. However, to get the most value out of a Skadi, you also would want to run 2 additional Colders. And not only do these Colders cost 2 mana, but also as well the chances of you drawing them whilst having a Skadi on board kind of limits the value of this card. She's nice on her own, and she does generate cards for a board. But to get the most value out of her, you have to sacrifice more deck slots, and that's just a little bit of an issue. That being said, 2/3 for 3 with a range ain't too bad. It ain't too bad. Sol, 2 stars. Personally, I love Sol. I think she's great. I think she has a lot of potential. But unless she does get some of those buffs, she's kind of lackluster on her own. She's good if you can get her onto an early and onto an empty-ish board, because she can then start helping control it and she can eat removal. But if she gets a silence, then she's just a 1/3 ranged. If she eats removal, well, fair enough, she ate removal, but it's just 3 mana and it can be very slow, especially when you look at things like Ratatoskr, who's a little bit faster, Skadi, who's a little bit more impactful, just as Skadi, and she leaves behind a 2/2 when you play that for 1 mana, which is very strong. Sol, believe me, if the meta slows down enough and you can get a Hell on board and a Sol on board and you can buff it up, Sol is amazing. She starts chunking everything in an area and she really makes good space control. But the meta's not really that slow. Let's be honest here. Fenrir, 2 stars. Here's a 4/5 for 4, which is alright. That's pretty okay. However, he is very slow and very abusable. 2 silences. Nemesis is quite a fun one. If you just leave this guy in sort of the back and you're like, oh, don't touch it, it's going to be a big threat. Nemesis comes along, you cry, silences abuse the hell out of this thing, and more importantly as well, your opponent has the option to stop you gaining that +2/+2. If your opponent attacks it, it doesn't gain the +2/+2 at the end of your turn, because technically it has attacked when your turn ends. Albeit it's the previous turn, but either way, that is the issue I have here. I think if they wanted to make it a little bit faster, gain +1/+1 at the end of each turn that it hasn't attacked is quite nice, because it means that yes, He's only a 3/4 when you have him on your turn. But by the time you get round to playing him, he's that 4/5, which is the same as when you're going to play him the other time. However, it helps keep him that little bit faster and a little bit more threatening more often. And as well, it moves a little bit of the counterplay. Still, easily abusable to silences and just controlling him a lot. Bologna loves controlling this thing. He just pushes him around for a bit. But yeah, that's kind of my feelings on Fenrir. Great in Arena. Fantastic in Arena. You plop down a couple of Fenrirs in Arena and people get scared and they cry. But Constructed isn't Arena. Thor, 3 stars. 2 full body is alright, and having that fast damage that's repeatable is nice. A little bit more defensive now, I feel, personally, and more for a comeback of, oh no, my enemy is surrounding my board, let me just really start smacking them hard. However, he can still be quite nice and offensive. Losing that ability to gain +1 from the Summoning Stone does sting a little bit, but it's still 2 damage that if you really want can just be 2 damage straight into the zone. It's not too bad, and there are other things you could run, like for example, you could run a Surtur over this, but there are arguments you could make for Thor in place of it. Hell, 4 stars. This is the definition of value. Making 3/3s with charge every turn is amazing. She can help you hold a strong board. She will likely also eat removal, and if your opponent doesn't have an answer to this, then she does get a lot of value. The big thing which a lot of people seem to forget as well is she has the ability to attack. As in, she can deal 3 damage to an enemy straight away. So it's not just a case of, oh, I'm now having to deal with 3/3s, that's dealing 3 damage. She could just deal that 3 damage herself. So even if she gets pushed back into a corner, she can still make those attacks. And that is a very useful thing to do. Hell, fantastic. And the longer she stays on the board and the longer she gets those +2/+2 buffs out, the better. Again, if we said that +2/+2 is worth 2 mana, you get that out, +2/+2. This card costs you 3 mana. +2/+2 again, this card costs you 1 mana. I know it's over a period of turns, but again, just think how good that can be for you. Loki, 1 star. Too slow, honestly. He's just really kind of slow. The stealth, yeah, he gets to live for a turn. But the fact that all he really is, haha, I am a ranged, I'm a melee unit that can attack at ranged. Sounds good, apart from the fact that he teleports to a random spot at the end of it. If he teleported back to where he was, great, that means you can't body block him. That could see some play. But it's not, it's teleport to a random spot that you don't control, which could be great for you, or it could be really awful. Ymir, 2 stars. He's really good when trading on your terms, when you attack, because he just deals 3 damage and doesn't get any return damage because he stuns them. However, when he deals the return damage, it doesn't stun them, so it only deals 3 damage. And yes, he's a big board. He's a big, you know, he's an ice giant, but it's very slow. It's very, very slow. It's good if it really grips the board, and he can be a solid way of just gripping a board indefinitely. But if you don't have the board when a Ymir's around, people just ignore it. So yeah, not too great. And finally, Freya, 5 stars. Really nice removal, really good control, and a really good card. Hang on a sec, didn't I say that the Banish card earlier was a bad card? Yes, I did, and now let me explain why. Even though, technically, she is hitting the same number of squares as Banish does. She's and even if you said that, alright then, that equates it out. 3 mana, 3/3, that deals 2 damage to 4 things is insane. The actual compound value of stats that you have here is insane. You are banishing a unit from anywhere on your opponent's side of the board, not just a 2x2 area. That's great. A 3/3 body, that's pretty alright. Dealing the 2 damage, that's pretty alright as well. Not to mention as well, it's just a panic button. This hits 4 things, alright? This hits 4 things. It's fantastic card. Really, really, really great card. Perfect card, perfect way to be able to hold out for a finisher if you need it in terms of clearing off board, perfect way of controlling a board, panic button, I need my opponent not to touch stuff right now. You use this. Yeah, you could run Banish and do it cheaper, but this is better. That's just it. She's better. And with that, we come to the end of the Norse minions. The Norse minions averaging at a 2.89 star out of 5, so a little bit better than their spells overall. And overall, the average Norse card comes to just shy of 2.5 stars at 2.41 stars. All in all, the decks that these guys usually end up building around are usually more board control focused, in so much that they want to try and think very much like a zoo deck in Hearthstone. You want to put minions on the board early, make efficient trades, control the board, and then get buffs. The more mid to late game style cards usually then sort of try and put in some of the later charge stuffs, so you start running in the bigger things like Fire Giants, you start running in things like Blade Masters to try and really cinch in some big bodies, and of course you run things like your Hells to gain value, Freyas to gain value, Ratatoskas, Skardis, maybe even a Soul if you really wanted to, you could throw in there, and all your removals sort of starts really trying to help control that board a lot heavier. Norse aren't necessarily the best at doing so, but the fact that they have the potential to create such a big, wide board early really helps them if your opponent doesn't have strong AoE removal for them. Either way, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you have enjoyed this video. I will be looking to go over the other pantheons for this, and will every so often come back and update these with regards to new cards that come in, meta shifts, and all those kinds of things, but they won't be too often. Again, maybe once a month, any of the new cards that are out, I'll go over, but until then, we have the rest of the pantheons to go over. Let me know in the comment section down below your guys' ratings for cards, whether or not you agreed with me, whether you disagreed with me, and most importantly, what you guys want to see with regards to content. Either way, ladies and gentlemen, my name has been Supersonic Blood. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and favorite for more, and to share this stuff so people know that it exists. You guys have been a fantastic audience, and I shall see you all next time.